All right, boys and girls, we are back with another edition of the Federalist Radio Hour. I'm your host, Ben Domenech. You can email us, as always, at radio@thefederalist.com. I am happy to be joined today by our political editor at The Federalist, John Davidson. Thanks so much, John, for taking the time to talk to me about what has been an incredible couple of weeks when it comes to border policy in America.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So,
let's talk about.
Just tell me what's going on.
Well, you wouldn't know it from watching White House press conferences, but there's a crisis at the border. The Biden administration, having loosened most of the policies put in place by the Trump administration at the border, is dealing with a sort of, once in a generation crisis at the border. The number of unaccompanied minors and families and single adults that are coming across the southwest border right now is going to be, according to the Secretary of Homeland Security, more than we've had in 20 years. And of course, what people don't realize when he uses that term, that number, 20 years ago, we had 1.6 million apprehensions at the southwest border. That's what triggered the Secure Fences Act, which was a bipartisan piece of legislation that was responsible for much of the border wall that exists today. So what he's talking about when he says we're going to have more people than we've had in 20 years is a border crisis, the likes of which many people who are politically aware nowadays have never experienced.
Tell me a little bit about what the different factors are going into this crisis. It's a simple thing to say, this is just because of the rhetoric that Joe Biden had as a candidate or something like that. Tell me a little bit, though, about the policy side of this, and also what other factors are motivating this kind of surge.
Yeah, you could break it down maybe into three different buckets of things. And one, as you mentioned, is the rhetoric. When, as a candidate, Joe Biden and other Democrats said, we're going to undo Trump's immigration regime. We're going to let asylum seekers in, you should be able to come, those things do matter, and they do motivate people in Central America and Mexico to make the journey. So that's one thing that's been talked about a lot. The other thing, which I mentioned earlier, is the actual policy changes, the executive orders. The way Congress has written our immigration laws, it gives massive leeway to the administrative state, to DHS and all of the agencies associated with immigration, to sort of create policy based on, which party controls the White House. And so executive orders carry in a way like the force of law. So you can create entire programs like DACA, which the Obama administration did. Can't get rid of them, but you can create them. Or like the Trump administration, create programs like the Remain in Mexico or the Migrant Protection Protocols, which forced a lot of folks who were seeking asylum to wait in Mexico for their asylum hearings in the United States. That is one program that the Biden administration repealed and sort of emptied out a lot of these migrant camps that were just on the south side of the Rio Grande, especially a large one in Matamoros. And all those people came into Brownsville, and from Brownsville on to points throughout the United States. And then the third thing is changes on the ground in Central America and Mexico. And there's a couple of things that have happened in recent months that sort of exacerbate the crisis. One is a pair of hurricanes that hit Central America in November and just devastated certain areas. It hit economies hard that were already crippled by the pandemic, especially in Honduras. And that was right around the presidential election. And so after Joe Biden won, you saw these caravans forming right away, initially in Honduras. And there's footage of like the caravan, the migrants in the caravan chanting Biden's name and, telling reporters Biden will let us in. And a lot of these people, were motivated to go because like I said, the combination of factors: Biden winning, the rhetoric that he came into office with, the executive orders that he promised to sign, plus devastation in their home countries. All these things are kind of creating a perfect storm and have created a massive migrant crisis at the border.
Tell me a little bit about who's profiting from these migrants and what that looks like in terms of practice.
Yeah, this is one thing that we've covered at the Federalist and hope to cover much more. The smugglers that charge migrants anywhere from $2,000 to $20,000, depending on their nationality, are profiting immensely off of this. They go into these sending communities, especially, I keep talking about Central America because the vast majority of the migrants are from the Northern Triangle countries of Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. But the smugglers and these smuggling networks will go into communities and offer these deals, and these varying rates. If you're a single adult, you pay one fare. If you're a family, maybe you pay another fare. And for families that want to send their children or their unaccompanied minors to the United States, or parents who are already in the United States who are sending for their children to join them in the United States, will pay a different fare. And there's a complicated and highly sophisticated wristband system that these smuggling networks have developed to keep track of who pays and who doesn't. And these wristbands have been discovered over the past month or so all over the north side of the Rio Grande in South Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley. And the wristbands they link back to databases that are controlled by these smuggling networks that have the contact information of the migrant, their cell phone number, their destination, what they've paid, what they owe, what the contact information is of their families back in their home country, the cell phones for their families. All this information is confirmed before they get the wristband and before they're taken across the border. Most of these people can't afford to pay the full freight up front, so they're in a kind of debt bondage even after they get to the United States. They owe these smuggling networks thousands of dollars, and these smuggling networks in turn are associated with and contracted with drug cartels that control northern Mexico. So nobody crosses the US-Mexico border without paying the smugglers, and the cartels make sure that they get their cut. They get a percentage of every fare, so to speak. And if you don't pay that fare, you don't cross. And if you cross under a sort of a debt bondage agreement, if you don't pay according to a certain schedule that's laid out, then you put your family in danger back home. You put yourself in danger even on this side of the border. And it's an entire, highly sophisticated, industrialized migrant black market.
One of the things that I try to stress every time that I talk about this issue on Fox or elsewhere is how much control the cartels have of the border in comparison to our apparent inability as the U.S. government to have control. Tell me a little bit about what it looks like from each side.
It's almost unbelievable the amount of control the cartels exert over the border, over their side of the border, and the territory, at border crossings and around border crossings in northern Mexico. It's best to think of them like governments. They are like governments, and in many cases, they are entwined with the local and state governments in these parts of Mexico. We have seen just over the past year and a half indications that the cartel infiltration of Mexican officialdom goes right to the top. You had Garcia Luna back in December of last year arrested in Dallas. Garcia Luna was like the equivalent of Mexico's director of the FBI during the presidency of Felipe Calderon. He was the guy who was in charge of Calderon's drug war. And the entire time he was in that position, he was in the pay of the Sinaloa cartel. The former Mexican defense minister who was arrested last year in Los Angeles and subsequently released to Mexico, and then all the charges were dropped, was also in the pay of the Sinaloa cartel. There's indications that the former president Enrique Peña Nieto was in the pay of the cartels. We have to think of these cartels as like the equivalent of a multinational corporation. Sinaloa cartel is in 50 countries, something like 50 countries in the world. Another one of the big cartels is in 38 or 40 countries in the world. The relationship between the Mexican government at every level, local, state, and federal, and the cartels is symbiotic. And I don't think we can talk about the Mexican state without talking about the cartels. And that has huge implications for our border and our border policy.
Is the way that Mexicans view these cartels, do they view them as criminal outfits, or do they view them almost as members of the community, labor unions, or something like that, that, may have some negative side effects, but actually are functionally fulfilling the role that, in America, you would expect of governmental and community organizations?
Yeah, it's a good question. Especially during the pandemic over the past year, we've seen some of the bigger cartels fulfilling that kind of government role, providing services, almost like Hezbollah does in Lebanon, and and to some extent like Hamas does in Gaza. They have provided food and water and medical supplies and personal protective gear, in some cases showing up to sort of city plazas in trucks and vans that are like emblazoned with the cartel logo, and like getting out in like their cartel like polo shirt and like distributing boxes of food and supplies to lines of like families and women and children that have come, expressly to get, this aid from the cartel. So when I say that it's best to think of them like governments, I mean that in like a really practical, like rubber meets the road type of way. They're fulfilling what we think of as government social services in parts of Mexico. And they're not like hated and reviled in the way that you might think a murderous criminal syndicate might be, because the experience that a lot of Mexicans have with these cartels is mostly positive. And in places where very powerful cartels are in control, and there's not sort of a turf battle or a violent contested territory, there is a kind of cartel peace. Now that has broken down, and that changes from region to region. There's a turf wars going on right now on the border, right across the Rio Grande. You can in some cases hear gun battles when you're on the Texas side of the border that are going on, just in recent weeks. But in places where one cartel has gained control, they do take on this kind of governmental role in many cases.
I did not realize that I needed a new mattress. Honestly, I didn't even think about my mattress at all. What I had, I figured, was just fine. It was getting the job done. I had no idea what a big difference it would make to sleep on a mattress that is tailored specifically to your body type and to the way that you sleep, until Helix sent me a mattress. And I'm telling you, right away, I noticed the difference. Helix Sleep has a quiz that takes just 2 minutes to complete and matches your body type and your sleep preferences to the perfect mattress for you. Why would you buy a mattress made for someone else? With Helix, you're getting a mattress that you know will be perfect for the way you sleep. Everybody's unique, and Helix knows that, so they have several different mattress models to choose from. They have soft, medium, and firm mattresses great for cooling you down if you sleep hot, and even a Helix Plus mattress for plus-size folks. I took the Helix quiz, and I was matched with the Helix Dusk mattress because I wanted something that felt soft, and I sleep on my side. I'm telling you, I love it. It's made a really big difference, and it's a huge upgrade over what I used to have, which I thought was totally fine. I didn't even realize how big of a difference it could make until I tried the Helix. So if you're looking for a mattress, you take the quiz, you order the mattress that you're matched to, and the mattress comes right to your door shipped for free. You don't ever need to go to a mattress store again. Personally, that might be my favorite part of the whole thing. Helix is awesome, but you don't need to take my word for it. Helix was awarded the #1 best overall mattress pick of 2020 and by GQ and Wired magazine. Just go to helixsleep.com/Federalist, take their 2-minute sleep quiz, and they'll match you to a customized mattress that will give you the best sleep of your life. They have a 10-year warranty, and you get to try it out for 100 nights risk-free. They'll even pick it up for you if you don't love it, but you will. Helix is offering up to $200 off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners at helixsleep.com/Federalist.
This episode is sponsored by Blue Chew. Blue Chew is making waves and bringing more confidence to the bedroom. Blue Chew is a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra and Cialis, but in chewable form and at a fraction of the cost. Blue Chew's tablets combat all forms of ED and can help men gain extra confidence when it's time to perform. Blue Chew is an online prescription service, so no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversations, no waiting in line at the pharmacy, and it ships right to your door in a discreet package. The process is simple. Sign up at bluechew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. The best part? It's all done online. Blue Chew's licensed medical professionals work with you to find the right ingredient and strength for your prescription. Don't like swallowing pills? There's no problems here. Blue Chew's sildenafil and tadalafil are chewable. Blue Chew's tablets are made in the USA and they prepare and ship direct, so it's cheaper than a pharmacy. So if you could benefit from extra confidence when it's time to perform, visit bluechew.com for more details and important safety information. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. Try Blue Chew free when you use our promo code Federalist at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's bluechew.com, promo code Federalist, to receive your first month free. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring the podcast. Tell me a little bit about that cartel war that you're talking about there and the region that it's happening.
This is near Roma, Texas, which is down in the Rio Grande Valley. And there is this is also, by the way, where a lot of the wristbands have been found. So the cartels and the smuggling networks in this area are using this highly developed wristband system. And by the way, I'll just step back for a second. One of the reasons the wristband system came into existence, we didn't see this during the border crisis in the spring of 2019. And part of the reason that we didn't is because that was so uncontrolled. There were massive groups of people turning themselves in, crossing the border. The migration was not as controlled on the Mexican side as it is now. And as a result, a lot of the smuggling networks and a lot of the cartels that control those routes and control that territory were missing out on payments because not everybody was paying, because you had these caravans that would form in Central America. And as they got closer to the US-Mexico border, they would break up into smaller groups. And by smaller groups, I mean, a couple hundred people, in one case, a group of more than 1,000 people crossed at one time in El Paso. And so not everyone was paying. And so the cartels and the smugglers got together and said, we need to come up with a system to make sure that doesn't happen again, so that we are actually getting all of the profits that are on the table here and keep track of who crosses. And so in this one area of the border across from Roma, Texas, there's a contest between the Gulf Cartel, which has controlled that area for a long time, and the remnants of, or a band of what was formerly known as the Zetas, which is now called the Northeastern Cartel, and they are vying for control of that plaza, or that corridor, which is a drug trafficking corridor, but it's also a migrant trafficking corridor. And there are pitched gun battles going on there right now, and the profits, whenever there's a contested territory like that and gun battles and violence, it disrupts the flow of drugs. But in this case, the flow of migrants is supplementing that lost income and is helping to finance the conflict between these two cartels right now. So literally migrant trafficking is financing cartel wars just on the other side of the US-Mexico border.
Run this forward for me. What do you expect to happen in the coming weeks and months?
We are about 2 months early right now for having the kind of numbers that we're seeing right now. Typically, migration spikes in April and May and June before it gets too hot in South Texas. That's what we saw in 2019. In May, I believe, close to 150,000 people were apprehended just in the month of May in 2019. But we are already past, 100,000 for the last 4 weeks or so. So what we're going to see in May and April, I believe, is numbers like we used to see 20 years ago. So hundreds of thousands of people apprehended. And that's to say nothing of the people who aren't apprehended, which, because the Biden administration is turning back in most cases single adults, you have a lot of illegal immigration in which the smugglers and the group of people that they are smuggling in are trying to evade Border Patrol, which is very different than Central American families and minors turning themselves into Border Patrol and claiming asylum, which is what we saw in 2019. Now we're seeing a lot more Mexican nationals, adult men, coming north to work. They don't want to be caught by Border Patrol. And so mayors in Texas are reporting now that they're routinely having high-speed chases through their communities. You had the situation a couple of weeks back in California where an SUV that had something like 25 illegal immigrants in it was hit by a tractor trailer. I think 13 of them died. That was part of a 2 SUV caravan that had more than 40 people between the 2 vehicles. These are people who do not want to get caught, who don't want to come and claim asylum. They're coming here to work. They're trying to get past the border without being detected. And then they're trying to get past the Border Patrol checkpoints that are, about 70 miles inland, so that they can get to where they're going. Most of them already have jobs lined up.
What kind of jobs are they coming here to do?
The same kind of jobs they've always come here to do, agricultural jobs, increasingly construction jobs, service industry jobs. And of course, this is the dirty little secret about illegal immigration in America, is that, these industries and the captains of these industries benefit mightily from high numbers of illegal immigration, because it drives labor prices down. And so people who own, hotel chains and large construction firms and large industrial agricultural concerns are just fine with immigration, with illegal immigration. They like it. They'd like to see more of it. This is a bipartisan problem, and it goes back decades.
The Biden administration has, to this point, been really feckless in terms of their response. I think, even their defenders, if you had a situation where they were being honest, would admit that. The reaction has been obviously, vociferous from Republican members. But I'm curious about what you think the dynamics of the current Democratic Party look like when it comes to the immigration issue. Because for all these progressives who were completely excoriating the Trump administration during its previous dealings along the border, what's the political ramifications for them of this moment in which, just as quick as turning off a light switch, it seems like the Biden administration created this crisis?
You'd think they would have been better prepared, at least in their response, like rhetorically, that they would have had some talking points pulled together for when this happened. Surely they knew it was going to happen, given all of the incentives in play, and just given the volatility of the border. The border has a tendency to take on a life of its own. Things can escalate very quickly at the border, and it very quickly gets out of everyone's hands, right? And we saw that with the Obama administration in 2014. We saw it with Trump in 2019, and we're seeing it again now. The political ramifications, I think, for Democrats are not good. I think the risk for them is that they lose a handle on this as sort of their issue. The Biden administration is trying very clumsily and very, very ineptly, I think, to position themselves as sort of like a humane, and morally upright in their response to the border crisis.
Hashtag civility.
Yeah, right. And they just keep contrasting, like, Trump dismantled our asylum programs, and we're just trying to rebuild that. As soon as we get it rebuilt, then we'll get this under control. Well, no, you won't get it under control, because that's just one piece of it. When you tell people, come to this country and seek asylum, but don't come yet. And you tell that to sort of like people in conditions of grinding poverty who are facing, gang violence and a ruined economy from hurricanes and COVID, they're not going to listen to you. They're also not going to like stay in their home countries and apply for asylum there, as Biden told George Stephanopoulos the other day. It's just completely naive and quite condescending, in fact, to think that will work, or that is sort of connected to reality in any way. So I think the worse the border gets, and it will get much worse, Democrats are in a position where they begin to look like they're totally disconnected from reality. And in contrast to their rhetoric about how humane and compassionate they are, they actually end up looking heartless and cold and completely out to lunch, because sooner or later images are going to come out of these facilities where they're holding these unaccompanied minors, which in some cases are way over capacity. And there's a media blackout that the administration has tried to impose. They don't want to let anybody in. They don't want any Border Patrol agents or CBP officers to talk to the media. But eventually this stuff is going to get out. And when it does, it's not going to be good.
Tell me about that media blackout, because it seems to me to be pretty unprecedented.
It is. This is something that NBC News reported this week, that the instructions have come down from Department of Homeland Security and Customs and Border Protection in Washington, from their top brass to sort of the CBP Border Patrol station level at the border. And the instructions, verbal only, no written memo, because they don't want a paper trail. But the instruction is, don't talk to the press. Don't accept any requests for ride-alongs. Don't allow anyone into these facilities to take pictures or to report on the conditions there. And it's a really bad look, because it looks like they're trying to hide a humanitarian crisis. And it looks like they're trying to shut down any information getting out about how many people are coming in, where they're being housed, under what conditions, and what's being done with these. Are they being released into the community? Are they being tested for COVID? In many cases, not. And so this is unprecedented. To your point, the Trump administration in June of 2018, in the midst of their family separation policy, which was widely panned, and I think rightly so, it was a bad policy. They were allowing reporters to come into the facilities where they were holding unaccompanied minors and to take pictures, to talk to the kids. Mike Pence went to one of these facilities with a gaggle of reporters. Congressional delegations went with embedded reporters. And reporters were also doing. I myself went on many ride-alongs. By land, sea, and air. And it was there was no problem with access or information. This is a complete 180, a really draconian, sort of authoritarian lockdown from the top on information about the border at a time when things are fairly spiraling out of control.
When it comes to the incentives that the Biden administration has on these areas of policy, what do you expect them to do? And do you think that there's going to be a congressional reaction to this beyond just the kind of shouting that we've seen in the last couple of weeks?
I don't think there's going to be a congressional reaction or any kind of congressional action beyond the theater, because I think that's all Congress is capable of on large issues anymore, is a kind of theater. But what I think the Biden administration is going to do, they are going to say they're doing the opposite, but they are going to largely follow the Trump administration in terms of policy. And we're already seeing that this week. Reports are coming out that the Biden administration is sort of quietly reaching out to Mexico to see if they can get Mexico to shoulder more of the burden on Mexico's southern border and control illegal immigration coming from Guatemala, which is sort of the corridor through which all these migrants go. There's a few points along that border where migrants come in on their way to the U.S. Outsourcing U.S. border policy to Mexico is a longstanding bipartisan tradition in America, and it can work in the short term, but long term it is deeply foolish and misguided. Trusting our border security to what amounts to a failing and corrupt narco state is a recipe for disaster, and it's also very unreliable. Trump was managed to get Mexican President Lopez Obrador on board with a threat of a tariff on U.S. imports. That was in June of 2019. And we saw him then deploy the National Guard to both borders, and we quickly saw a reduction in illegal immigration from Central America. The Biden administration apparently is offering some COVID vaccines to Mexico in exchange for cracking down on illegal immigration, and we'll see how that works. But the larger issue here is that someone has to take responsibility for the failing states south of the Rio Grande. And if Mexico can't do it or won't do it, and it doesn't seem that they can or will, then at some point the United States is going to have to. The United States is going to have to confront its long-term strategic interests on the border. And, whether that happens under a Democrat or some future Republican, I don't know. But the idea that we would spend, 20 years and untold billions in places like Afghanistan and Iraq, sort of building up, democracy there, but we would allow Mexico and the Northern Triangle to descend into chaos and have what amounts to a Somalia or a Syria on our southern border is insane.
John Davidson, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about this today.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
I'm Ben Dominich. You've been listening to another edition of the Federalist Radio Hour. We'll be back soon with more. Until then, be lovers of freedom and anxious for the furlough.